Welcome to the Engineering with Nature podcast. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been working on the Engineering with Nature initiative since 2010, working and collaborating to advance the use of natural processes and systems to deliver a broad range of economic, environmental, and social benefits. EWN develops and implements nature-based solutions for water and infrastructure projects. It brings together a growing international community of practitioners, scientists, engineers, and researchers to harness the power of nature to innovate and solve problems and create sustainable solutions. This podcast tells their stories. Now here's your host, Sarah Thorne of Decision Partners.
We are already seeing that climate change is increasing coastal hazards and putting people who live and work in coastal communities at risk. Our guest is actively working to understand the role that ecosystems play in providing natural defenses for both people and property. By combining innovative, nature-based solutions with insurance incentives, he hopes to significantly increase coastal resilience. Welcome to Season 5, Episode 10. Jeff King, National Lead of the Engineering with Nature program with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and I are really pleased to welcome back Mike Beck. Mike joined us in Season 1, Episode 6, and he's recently been appointed Director of the new Center for Coastal Climate Resilience at the University of California in Santa Cruz. Hey, Mike, we're really pleased to have you back. Welcome.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, Jeff. It's really great to be back on the show. Looking forward to a fun conversation together. So much has changed since 2020 in many ways.
Well, Mike, it is great to see you again and to be able to talk with you. I really am excited about the conversation we're going to have today. So many wonderful opportunities that are happening for you out at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And recently, I had the opportunity to be with you for a week, with you and your colleagues out there as part of the Insurance and Nature Symposium. So it was a very interesting, timely symposium, a lot of good information there, a lot of active, highly energetic individuals all participating and focused on this very important topic.
It's timely indeed, and can't wait to hear more about the symposium. It's very interesting that the insurance industry is taking such a key role in supporting and really enabling coastal resilience. Mike, I understand that AXA, a major international insurance company, sponsors your chair in the Coastal Resilience Lab. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was really lucky a couple of years back to get one of the AXA Research Chairs. They only offer one a year globally. It's a 5-year chair. It doesn't come with any strings attached. I don't have to be working with AXA, but also, to be very honest with you, I enjoy working with them. They have an incredibly important role to play in both understanding our risks, ultimately being able to price our risks and value the benefits of nature, and then find different ways that we can work to protect people and property by enhancing nature's benefits. So really able to enjoy that partnership, benefit a great deal from it, and really collaborate.
I think it's such a neat opportunity. I have to tell you, the previous show that we did with you is one of our top sellers. People are still going back and listening to that show because they love the idea that you're working with insurance and you can actually put a price on the risks that we're facing with climate change. So it's totally cool. So your work has evolved now into this new role at the center. Talk about that, Mike. We want to hear about what you're doing, what the center's all about, what your role is.
Yeah, so a lot of things have changed, as I said, and we're seeing a lot of the impacts of climate change. Climate change is no longer a future problem. It's a here and now problem. And the state legislature recognizes that. So they've been investing in the research, but more importantly, in the action towards solutions that we need to be able to adapt and build resilience to these changes. So the state is investing in the University of California system more broadly and many other public agencies that can help us adapt. And they made a $20 million investment into the University of California, Santa Cruz to establish a new center for coastal climate resilience.
I think that's fantastic. Absolutely. And I understand that the center is really focused on making diverse investments. You're interested in studying coastal climate resilience from multiple perspectives. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think it's very important, just as the federal administration has recognized the real need for focus both on nature-based solutions and on underserved communities as we address risks and think about the investments that we're making to help pull people up and make them more resilient to these changes. So that's something that we're seeing at the state level and at the federal level. And so a couple of things that we hope really sets the center apart are, one, even though we are university-based, we are very solutions-oriented. So really thinking about what we can do to help reduce risks and help people adapt. At the same time, we've got programs that are really going to increasingly help us understand the equity considerations of how we do this. We really do think that we have often put resources into many of the places that are pretty well off. They face risks too, so I'm not trying to downplay those risks, but we've often invested in those kinds of coastal communities when we do, for example, benefit cost analyses, and people with high home values or high property values often can benefit positively from such a benefit to cost ratio. And we really need to think about ways that we understand the risks that some of these underserved communities are facing. Their vulnerabilities. They may be people below poverty or have little access to transportation, little ability to get out of harm's way. These are the communities in our nation that we need to do a better job addressing, and we hope we're able to do that through the center as well as through our many agency partnerships like that with the Corps.
Mike, that's fantastic to hear, and you are doing some incredible work, and so many coastal communities in California really will benefit so much from your active participation and the collaborations that you are bringing to bear on these issues. And certainly with the atmospheric river events that we've been watching, certainly seeing happen in real time, you're absolutely right. Climate change is here. And so the solutions that you and your team and those in California are coming up with certainly will inform next steps and how we proceed. And this is a really interesting space, this idea of nature-based solutions and the insurance industry. And many of our listeners may not sort of see that intersection plainly. It may not be that clear. And I was hoping that perhaps you could offer a little bit more information, talk maybe a little bit more about the role of insurance in building more resilient communities and that nexus back to how nature fits into this picture.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Yeah, there's a couple of ways that we can think about the role of nature and the role of insurance in helping both to protect nature and to use nature to help reduce risks to communities. So maybe the first and easiest way to think about this is the kind of work that we've done with the industry and some of the leading risk modeling firms to understand how do reefs and wetlands reduce waves and storm surge and thereby reduce the amount of flooding and as well as erosion. But flooding is what really is a major focus for the industry. So we really look at how reefs work. Reefs work by breaking waves and they dissipate that wave energy offshore so that you can be standing onshore, say, for example, in Hawaii, and the teeny little wave will be lapping up at your feet, and you're watching surfers offshore on 15, 20-foot waves. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the reef providing services offshore, reducing that wave impact.
That's right.
In the same way, mangroves or marshes reduce waves, but really they reduce storm surge. And so they almost act like a dam as that storm surge comes in. And, people have known about this for a very long time. Fishers always take their boats deep into mangroves if you wanted to protect them. And if you really wanted some stark imagery right now of how important mangroves were in recent events, the area in Southwest Florida around Hurricane Ian, if you look at some of NOAA's before and after photos of those areas where we've left mangroves in place saw very little damage. Areas where we either built on top of or even in front of mangroves showed really devastating and heartbreaking damage. But this is because we've allowed people to build straight in harm's way without using the benefits of nature in front of them. So back to insurance. Mangroves are really important for reducing risks and payouts if you leave them in place. And so this is why the insurance industry is interested in one very important aspect. The other and the second one is to actually insure nature as an asset in and of itself. And this example is most clear from the policy for insuring reefs just south of Mexico. So the Nature Conservancy, and when I was with the Nature Conservancy, we worked with many other partners, Swiss Re included, to develop an insurance policy for the Mesoamerican reef just south of Cancun. And the idea is that reefs, just like artificial seawalls, so a reef is a natural seawall. It's part of our national natural infrastructure for reefs in the U.S. That's acting as a seawall. It can be damaged by storms. So storm damage topples over corals and they go back into the lagoon. And those corals are rolling around in the lagoon. They have about 2 weeks to live while they're being rolled around back in there, unless somebody is being supported to get in the water, get those back on the reef and glued back in place. And by the same vein, supporting some fishers to be able to remove essentially the garbage, the flotsam and jetsam of our daily lives, like refrigerators and nets that are rolling around on that reef. Really important to get that stuff off of there. And an insurance policy like this pays out immediately after certain storm events, supports those activities so that we can start to revitalize the reef.
Fantastic. Well, Mike, I got to say thank you very much for breaking that down for us and our listeners. I think that's one of the best examples I have heard to date on how all of this intersects. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's great. I think, most people's mental model of insurance is that it's reactive. Insurance kicks in after something happens. And the work that you're doing is really proactive. It's to help prevent, bad things happening. And it's just makes you change your thinking. So that's great, Mike.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think the industry still has a ways to go there. I mean, it still is true that, right now, insurance's most important role is helping make people whole after such events. But they have been, and I actually think with some pushing, they can play an even greater role in helping to reduce those risks. And I mean, frankly, it's in their best interest because as we're looking at a climate changed future, honestly, insurance is going to get more and more expensive,
That's right.
out of reach for some communities, unless we're doing things now collectively, both publicly and privately, to reduce those risks.
Yeah, it's in all of our best interests, to your point. Absolutely. Let's move on and talk about your symposium. You recently held this Insurance and Nature Symposium in UC Santa Cruz, and it sounds like I read the agenda and I thought, wow, does that ever sound exciting? So many things I want to ask you about. Let's start by talking about the focus of the symposium and who came, what was it all about, Mike?
Yeah, so the really important thing that we were trying to do is to bring together some diverse partners. So some folks from the insurance sector, some folks from the agencies, with the Corps in the lead, but also FEMA there, working closely with the California Department of Insurance as a co-host for the meeting, and then a bunch of NGOs in addition to lots of folks from the insurance sector itself. So it's really being able to bridge business, agencies involved in risk management, NGOs who are working all over the space, and academics as well. And we had a really nice, diverse group of significant leaders in this space. So the real purpose of the symposium was to get these diverse thinkers together, really be talking about how we reduce risks for these communities using both nature and insurance, and finding the different ways in which we can really overlap risk management on the federal side and risk industry, the business side of reducing these risks. And, one of the, among the many nice things that I heard is, folks, for example, from the NGO community were saying, we go to all these conservation finance things and never is there so much business interest. We don't normally see so many business folks there. And in the same vein, I think when Jeff and I were organizing this, we were really thinking about the Corps, if we're being honest, doesn't know that much about insurance. It's not a regular feature of what they do. And so, but the Corps has enormous influence on the industry. Just think to the damage curves that are used worldwide that say, if a house is flooded by a certain amount of water, here's how much damage happens to that kind of structure. And it's different if it's a mobile home versus a two-story house. And the Corps has been central to developing such things, in addition to the risk models and everything like that. So has played a really important role. And we were trying to make that role even tighter so that, particularly with nature in mind, what we both can do on the risk management side, the academic side and the business side, to improve, for example, even those modeling of how we assess nature's benefits.
Oh, really cool. Jeff, you got to be there in person. You were a co-host and a participant.
That's right.
What were the big takeaways for you?
Yeah. Well, Sarah, it was a fantastic symposium, and there was not a seat left in the house. People, standing room only, if you will. And what really came across early on for me was the energy in the room, the enthusiasm for this topic, the senior leaders that were participating in these discussions, and the commitment that they had to see this through, that they recognized the intersection of insurance and natural infrastructure, and they wanted to get there. And so the way it was arranged, we had, I believe it was 3 different panels, all with subject matter experts or senior leaders, in addition to a fireside chat. And it was my pleasure to accompany Mr. Steve Hill, who is out of the USACE headquarters. He is the Director of Contingency Operations and the Chief of the Office of Homeland Security for the Corps of Engineers. And he participated in the fireside chat. Wonderful conversation that occurred there, which also included Commissioner Laura for the California Insurance. And he really offered, I thought, some very insightful thoughts on what was happening in the state of California. Wonderful conversations that sort of happened there during the breakouts, as well as during sort of those sessions where people were able to ask questions of those that were offering presentations. So just couldn't have asked for a better opportunity to learn more about what was happening in this space and to meet some fantastic people.
It sounds just awesome. We'll make sure that we put, links in our show notes to the outtakes of the symposium. But I want to dig into some of the specific topics that you discussed and just talk about some of the highlights. One of the topics was reducing risk with nature and insurance. And I wanted to talk about why it was so important to the folks in the room that you put more focus on integrating nature into insurance products. And maybe, Mike, we could start with you.
Yeah, well. First, I also want to do just a little bit more scene setting, if you will, because we were so lucky, given the weather we've had out here
Yes.
of recent. When we started organizing this symposium, Jeff and I and the folks in the California Department of Insurance and Ocean Science Trust. Back in early December, late November, we weren't sure we were going to have enough water for people to drink. At that time, 10 plus atmospheric rivers later, and man, we got more than enough. And then we had some bookending storms just either side of the symposium, but got this beautiful 2-day window, sun shining, sitting right here on the coast where, we could get people an environment where they could really talk to one another, do that. We had a very nice beach walk where folks could get outside, go down, look at the waves, think about what that means in terms of flooding, think about the habitats that are providing the protections. And I had some folks come to me from the insurance industry and say, I just met some of these other folks here who are doing similar work to us, and we just started to devise a mangrove insurance project that we think could really work out. And this was just during the beach walk and brainstorm. Through that story, I give you kind of some idea of what we were hoping for in that kind of collaboration. Lots of people are working on pieces of this. I understand a bit about how mangroves protect communities, and I understand a bit about how to model that for the industry. I'm from the Army Corps ERDIC, and I understand these kinds of models really well. We've always included nature. It seems almost like second nature to us, but it turns out that what we do could actually be useful to the industry if they knew more about it. And it was these kinds of connections that we were trying to draw together.
Lots and lots of synergy.
That's right. And, I just maybe emphasize a little bit on this the importance of collaboration and the diversity of individuals and organizations that attended, and the idea of public-private partnerships and how this also figures into the equation for success. The idea here being that we can have government and the private sector all being there working in this space together to advance the development of infrastructure and do it in a way that we have the private sector being able to invest in this space. In this case, having the insurance industry investing in these natural infrastructure features that provide some degree of risk reduction. And then in turn, there is this sort of symbiotic relationship that occurs and ultimately gets us to the desired endpoint. So I think that from where I sit, this is moving very quickly now, and we will continue to see a lot more success.
All that synergy and energy coming together, it's gonna put you in fast forward. One of the things I was really interested in your conference lineup was how you were going to talk about advancing insurance tools to actually help advance environmental and social justice at the community level. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you talked about at the symposium?
Yeah, and I would actually have to say, again, if we're being honest, this is probably one of the most challenging areas for industry right now, and also challenging for us as academics and for the federal agencies as well. We're hearing policies that we should be providing more support to these underserved communities and to nature-based solutions, and it's a real challenge to figure out, well, how do we include those kind of social vulnerability, those equity considerations into a benefit cost analysis or into a model that the industry is going to use when we think about where we should be focusing efforts in policies that help reduce risks. So it's a real challenge. One of the things that we're doing with the insurance industry, and this is through the partnership with the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, that's ORA for short, we're developing a coastal risk index, which takes your kind of typical risk models where you're assessing flood risk and you're then going and looking at the people and property that are exposed to that flood risk, and adding some social vulnerability considerations so that you really see where you would focus your efforts differently. And a kind of classic example that I would typically draw here is to think about a peninsula that's got a beachside community on one side, and so you've got storms, you've got damages. They're usually expensive coastal homes, and we do a lot to make sure that we insure and that we repair after storm events. And this is often in beach environments, so we spend a lot of time working in these beach environments. If you go just to the backside of that peninsula, you can think about a place like Tampa Bay or somewhere like this. There's often wetlands, and there are often communities that are less served back there. Many of the people who are employed throughout Tampa Bay supporting its many services and livelihoods. And those folks are also getting damaged in these storms, often living in very high-risk areas around marsh environments. And, I like to think that if we were focusing better on those folks, we'd be reducing their risks, and we would often be investing in wetlands and oyster reefs, for example, to help reduce those. So that's the kind of change, and by thinking about how we measure these communities, how we think about social vulnerability, that we're going to change the way that we help protect them.
Even how you think about what the community is. We saw examples of exactly what you're talking about in work that I was doing with the Corps along the Jersey Shore. Just you go to the Back Bay, things look a lot different.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. I just said Tampa. I mean, you can think about almost any kind of kind of barrier island or peninsula. I mean, this is a very, very common occurrence and very common around our urban and semi-urban areas when you really think about where the folks who support these cities and urban areas, where they have left to live that's anywhere even close to where they need to work.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's really interesting. I also want to talk about another question that you were going to ponder at the symposium was about the role of science. And one of the things that I thought was interesting was the question around what can science tell us so far about the effectiveness of nature-based solutions in reducing risks in coastal communities. And this is something that the Corps has been working on the Engineering with Nature program has been working on for 15 years for sure, and the Corps has been working on. But where did that conversation go at the symposium? Jeff, maybe you could kick us off.
Yeah, well, for me, there were very exciting presentations that were offered in those panels, and it really confirmed what I think all of us know, and Mike certainly touched on this earlier, which is we do get engineering benefits derived from natural features like mangroves, oyster reefs, wetlands. A lot of great work happening in this space. For ERDIC, for example, the Army's Engineering Research and Development Center, a lot of great research that's happening across the Corps enterprise within districts where we have demonstration projects within our EWN proving ground districts. Certainly, I think about even breaking it down to independent kind of understanding of wave principles and dynamics when it comes to working in flume systems to be able to actually get at quantifying performance. What is that wave reduction or energy reduction that can be achieved through these features? And so a lot of wonderful work, a great testimony sitting there in that room to hear others that were doing similar kinds of research and coming up with the same kinds of conclusions. And so maybe, we could get Mike to talk a little bit about some of the work he's doing directly when it comes to his research focused on his Refit project.
Yeah, well, let me say just a couple things here. I mean, one, on the symposium itself. I mean, the symposium is nearing the end of a project that we've been doing with the Engineering with Nature program, where we've been going out and interviewing folks in the industry and in the federal risk management agencies, understanding where we can make recommendations for improving opportunities to link nature and insurance. So we've gotten lots of great insights from the industry, and we see lots of opportunities where there can be much greater linkages. And we'll be providing a report in follow-up to this in the coming months here with a variety of recommendations for how we can improve risk models, how we can improve some of these insurance products, how we can improve some of our response, both at the federal and in the business side, to disasters that will both benefit people and nature. So we do have a lot coming up there. But then, just as Jeff noted, one of, to me personally, and not just because of the project, but simply because of Department of Defense, DARPA's focus on a refence program, I think is incredible. And what DARPA recognized is that there looks to be sufficient enough evidence out there to say that these reefs are likely to provide these kinds of coastal protection benefits. Not likely, do provide these coastal protection benefits. How can we work with them in a way that can help defend military installations and then be used in other areas on our coastline once we really make some breakthroughs in how to do this engineering, and then how to get corals to live on top of, and also oysters, but corals in our case, get corals to live on top of these engineered structures. And so we have this DARPA Refence project together with the University of Miami in the lead, and a whole bunch of collaborators as part of it. The Army Corps and USGS are reviewing all of the progress on this work, and we're really coming up with innovative ways to design these reefs using these 3D flow models that really help you think about how water moves through a reef, not just over it, not just breaking it, but like what happens in the interstices of a reef. Where does all that energy go? And then how do you get corals to live on top of this in the face of warming oceans and rising seas? And DARPA's laid out some really aggressive goals that we got to meet. It's very exciting and very challenging.
Okay, I'm excited. You're going to have to send us some links so that we can see what you've been doing. It's really interesting, Mike, because we had in season 2, episode 5, we had the project manager from DARPA, Lori Adorando, on our podcast, and she was talking about the concept of the Refit Project. And you guys are doing it and proving it, and it's a real thing. It's just fantastic.
And I think that a lot is going to come, and I don't say this just from our project. There are other teams that are also just having to, blow the doors off of the kind of work that we've done in the past. What we have in terms of deliverables and tight timelines, and what we've been given as the task. For the folks who are involved that are ecologists, I can tell you for certain that they haven't been confronted with that kind of goal setting and challenging deadlines and the like. And it's been very enjoyable, and we're already doing so many cool things that I think will ultimately take hold in helping to get us to better reef restoration and more dynamic and living coastal protections that I can actually keep up with the kind of changes that we're seeing in our climate.
I suspect we're going to get a lot of our listeners that are going to be wanting to know how they can volunteer to work with Mike. I just get that. I know that's going to happen. So let's just get ready to receive those calls and emails.
I don't think there's too many boring days working with Mike.
No, I don't think so either.
Mike, before we wrap up, I want to hear about another big development. The Center for Coastal Climate Resilience recently became a formal partner of the Network for Engineering with Nature, or the NUN as we call it. I want to hear a little bit about that and what it means to your work and what's coming up there.
Yeah, well, my program here in the Coastal Resilience Lab, both when it was kind of it was always been part of the university here, but also I used to wear a hat as lead marine scientist of the Nature Conservancy. And with that hat on, been working with Jeff and Todd Bridges for 7 years or more around these ideas. So, I mean, all of this work has been jointly developed for both of our programs, really, I mean, together from nearly the beginning for both of us. And, so many of the strides that we've been able to make in understanding the benefits of these habitats have always come from our collaboration and the collaborators that the Corps was bringing together as part of, for example, these international guidelines. And that has always been really central to our ability to advance this work. And so joining Noon now that we have formally also become the Center for Coastal Climate Resilience at UC Santa Cruz, joining Noon as a formal partner and even expanding the work that we do feels completely natural, and looking forward to the work, expanding the work that we do with the University of Georgia, among many of the other partners in Noon, as part of really helping to establish nature-based solutions as a common part of what we do in risk management.
It has been a great thrill to work with Mike and his team over the years. And this is just sort of a logical next step that we would see his center integrate into the Network for Engineering with Nature, to have Mike and his team be able to collaborate with these other diverse organizations to really accelerate our understanding, our ability to conduct collaborative research in ways that really help us promote and expand knowledge in this space. And then also, I'm thinking about students too. We think about all of the academic partners that we have, having Mike be there to offer his perspective, his knowledge, and be able to teach the next generation of engineers and scientists. It's just fantastic when you stop to think about it. So really wonderful that we have Mike now and his center joining the Noon, and look forward to hearing more about all the great work that happens in this network once Mike gets fully integrated.
Yeah, one of the things that we're very excited about in the Noon partnership, and was really cemented here at the Symposium as well, is the need for some professional development courses, particularly for those in the risk industry, who really do want to understand nature-based solutions and their role in risk reduction, but really just don't have capacity in the industry to do that. And so really being able to connect what we know from the Corps, what we know from FEMA, what we've been studying, and then helping to advise, some of these leading risk industry folks about how to incorporate nature-based solutions. That's a really important opportunity, and one, that as an academic institution, we have the kind of skills and chops to do. And if I could just do one more thing that I wanted to make sure of, we sometimes talk about, the work that my lab does, but this involves many folks. And I'd like to, just give my great thanks to a handful of people who've been on our team from the very beginning, helping out, and that's Borja Reguero, really a leading coastal engineer in this space, and Pelayo Menendez for his work on mangrove habitats, and Megan Kelso, who's increasingly helping us to think about these equity and insurance considerations on my team. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for us, but just important to recognize that it's the work of many, many, many people.
Absolutely. And everything that you've said today is about synergy, the synergy of putting all of these smart scientists together and just really running with this thing, really making it happen. I can't believe how fast forwarded all of the work is that you're doing, Mike. Since we talked, it wasn't that long ago. It was the fall of 2020. And this is like nature-based solutions, engineering with nature, and insurance on speed or something. It's just like, wow, fast forward. It's very, very exciting.
Yeah.
So you've given us a lot to think about, Mike. the growing importance of nature-based solutions in reducing risk and bringing that understanding the value of protecting people, coastal communities, where people live and work, their livelihoods. That's so important. And boy, you're really moving the needle, you and your team. So congratulations.
Well, as always, thank you for the very kind words. And, it is true that, the best thing about all of this work is working with great people, and so have enjoyed every bit of it. Thank you.
And I also want to extend my thanks to Mike as well, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to be out there with you in California. Looking forward to many more exciting opportunities for us to gather and talk about this very exciting topic.
Great. And to all of you, thank you so much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we sure hope you'll join us again when we talk about engineering with nature.
You've been listening to the EWN podcast, developed by Sarah Thorne and Jeff King, National Lead, Engineering with Nature Initiative, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Now, for more information, you can visit our website, engineeringwithnature.org. The EWN podcast is produced by iContact Productions for the Engineering with Nature program within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm Dave Trafford.